The book appeared without warning. It sat on the desk in the small apartment, as if it had always belonged there. The cover was dark leather, worn but strong, the kind of thing one might imagine pulled from the shelf of an abandoned library. No title, no markings. Just a single object radiating a quiet pull. He noticed it when he came home late in the evening. The door was locked, the windows secured, yet the book lay in the center of the desk where his laptop usually rested. He stood for a long time, staring at it, wondering if his memory had failed him. He lived alone, careful about every detail of his space, and there had been no book that morning. The silence of the apartment deepened as he reached for it. The leather felt cold beneath his fingers. He opened it. The pages inside were yellow, thick, smelling faintly of smoke. He saw neat handwriting across the first page. The words were dated. The entry claimed to describe an accident that had happened earlier that afternoon, several blocks away, on the corner of Mason and Fifth. A car had jumped the curb, striking a man waiting at the crosswalk. The description was precise, from the sound of metal scraping against stone to the cry of the man as he fell. The handwriting ended with a single line. It happened at 3:42. The man checked the clock on his wall. It was now 8:15. The event had already occurred, if it had occurred at all. He felt a flicker of unease. Without thinking, he opened his laptop and searched local news. The headline was there. A man killed at Mason and Fifth. The article gave the same details, down to the time. He closed the laptop. His hand shook. He stared at the book. The second entry filled half the next page. It was dated tomorrow. It spoke of a fire in an apartment building on Grand Street. Flames tearing through 3 floors, a mother and child trapped until firefighters pulled them free. The time again was exact, 9:27 in the morning. He snapped the book shut. He left it on the desk, refusing to look at it again, though sleep did not come easily. Dreams pushed through, fragments of smoke, the roar of fire, the heavy sound of boots on stairs. When morning arrived, he told himself it was only a coincidence. He dressed, drank his coffee, walked through the city to work. At 9:27, he remembered the entry and checked his phone. News alerts covered the screen. A fire had broken out on Grand Street. The coincidence died then. When he returned home that evening, the book waited on the desk, now open. A new entry filled the next page. It spoke of a mugging in the park near the river. A young man beaten, left bleeding beside the path. The handwriting described the shape of the attacker's knife, the color of the victim's jacket, the pale glow of the lamps above. It listed the exact time, 11:04 at night. He closed it, but he could not resist. At 11:04 he stood at the river park, hidden among trees. He saw the figures moving in the dark. The attack unfolded with the precision of written lines. He ran forward shouting, but the moment he did, the attacker vanished into shadows, leaving the victim groaning. The book had not mentioned his arrival. He returned home carrying the weight of something that no longer felt natural. The book gained entries each day, never blank, never hesitant. The handwriting was the same across every page, steady and patient, as if carved into the world before the ink dried. The entries were always near, never far. Accidents, deaths, tragedies, each event written hours or a day before it occurred. He tried tearing a page out, but when he turned the cover again, the sheet had returned, flawless, the words intact. He tested the pattern. He left the book closed, stored in a drawer, locked with a key. Still, the next evening when he opened it, the fresh entry was there. He tried burning a corner of the paper, yet the flame smothered itself as if deprived of air. He tried throwing the book into the trash outside the building, but by the time he came back inside, it sat once more on his desk, waiting. His life began to bend around its presence. He read each entry with dread, then watched the news or went to see for himself. Always the words matched the world. Always the time and place aligned. And then the entries began to grow closer to him. The first came 2 weeks after the book's arrival. It described a man slipping on the wet steps of the subway station he used daily. The words described the man's clothing, his bag, even the broken watch that shattered against the ground. The entry ended with, "He never rises again." He froze reading it. The description matched him too well. The jacket, the bag, even the brand of his watch. He told himself it could not be real. That evening he walked home instead of taking the subway. When he reached his apartment, he opened the book again. The entry had changed. Now it described another man on those same steps, wearing a jacket of the same color. It described the shattered watch, though it did not say it was his. The handwriting had not smudged, not rewritten, but shifted, as if the page had always contained this truth. The next day the news confirmed the accident. The book knew him. He tried ignoring it. He left it closed for days. He told himself he would not feed it with his fear. Yet each night curiosity broke him. He read again, and the words continued to grow nearer. A woman stabbed in the grocery store he often visited. A delivery truck losing control near his street. A neighbor collapsing in the stairwell of his building. One evening he found an entry that mentioned his own apartment. It spoke of voices heard through the walls, a scream echoing down the hall. He pressed his ear to the door, listening. Hours later, the scream came true. A tenant across the hall was attacked by a stranger who fled before police arrived. The book was no longer about accidents in the city. It was closing in, circling him. Sleep became impossible. He left lights on, staring at the cover, waiting for the pages to fill themselves. He no longer wondered who wrote the words. The book itself wrote. He no longer wondered why it appeared. Only the knowledge that one day soon it would write his name. The entries stretched longer. The handwriting painted images of bodies on streets, smoke rising from buildings, shadows moving through alleys. He no longer verified them. He no longer needed proof. The words were enough. They pressed into his thoughts, leaving no space for anything else. And then came the entry that froze his blood. It was late. He had forced himself not to open the book all day, but at midnight he lifted the cover. The page was already filled. The date was tomorrow. The words began with calm precision, describing rain falling over the city, wind moving through branches. Then the details shifted. They spoke of a man in his apartment. The words described the faint hum of his refrigerator, the books on his shelf, the crack on the wall near his desk. The man sat at his desk reading. The description named the book. The final line was clear. He does not reach the morning. He closed it hard, breath ragged. The room spun. He stared at the desk where it sat, waiting. He shoved it into the closet, burying it beneath clothes, as if the words could be muffled by fabric. He paced the room until dawn. He stayed awake, refusing to sleep, eyes fixed on the door. Morning arrived. He was alive. He opened the closet with shaking hands. The book lay on top of the clothes, not beneath them. He opened it. The entry was unchanged. Yet at the bottom, in new handwriting, a single sentence appeared. It is not yet morning. The words clung to him like chains. It is not yet morning. He shut the book, shoved it back into the closet, and braced the door with a chair. He told himself that survival meant movement. If the book could predict, then perhaps he could outrun the prediction. He stayed awake through the night, pacing, drinking black coffee until his stomach churned. When the first pale light broke through the window, he collapsed into the chair and stared at the ceiling. Morning had come. He had lived. He staggered to the closet. The book waited at the top, smooth leather unmarked. He pulled it out, telling himself he would not open it. But his hands betrayed him. He opened the cover. The new entry was there, dated for that very day. It spoke of him again. The handwriting described him leaving his apartment, crossing the street, his mind heavy with dread. It described the screech of tires, the shattering of glass, the sudden force against his chest. It described the silence that followed. The exact time was written with merciless care, 10:43 a.m. He stared at the clock. 9:12. He dropped the book as if it burned. His breath came shallow. He pressed his palms to his temples. The handwriting never lied. The time pressed forward, no matter his struggle. If he stayed inside, would the world bend to find him? If he fled, would fate draw him into its path? He sat frozen until 10:30, staring at the door. He would not leave. He swore it to himself. He dragged a chair against the door, locked it, bolted it, pressed his back to it. Minutes slid like blades across his nerves. 10:43 came. The room held stillness. He listened for the screech of tires, the crash, but only silence filled the air. His chest heaved. Relief spilled through him. He had defied it. He had survived. With shaking hands he picked up the book. The page no longer spoke of the street. The words had changed. Now it described a man sitting against his door, heart thundering, telling himself he was safe. The next line chilled him to the bone. The air in his lungs falters. His hand clutches his chest. He does not rise. He staggered back, pressing fingers to his chest. His heart thundered but steady. He whispered aloud that it was a lie. He waited for the pain. None came. After long minutes, he let out a shuddering breath. He placed the book on the desk. But when he glanced again, the sentence at the bottom shifted. Not yet. The words blurred before his eyes. He could not fight sleep much longer. Exhaustion gripped him, forcing his eyelids down. He dreamed of the book, pages turning endlessly, his name scrawled across every line. The following morning, he woke still alive. The book lay open on his chest. He did not remember lifting it. His pulse hammered as he read the newest entry. This time the writing did not describe the city, or accidents, or strangers. It described his day in complete detail. The time he rose, the food he ate, the calls he ignored, the glance he gave the window. Line after line mapped each movement, each thought, each silence. It was no longer prophecy. It was transcription. He threw it across the room. The pages flapped open, and the book landed face down. He left it where it fell, but every hour he felt its pull. By evening he gave in, turning it over. The entry had grown longer, as if it had kept writing even while he looked away. His own words of denial were recorded, his trembling, his desperate act of throwing it aside. Everything had been captured. The last line of the entry read, "He reads these words now." He dropped it, skin clammy, pulse racing. His life was no longer private. His thoughts were no longer his own. The next day he tested it. He refused to speak, refused to move, sat still in a chair for hours. When he opened the book again, the page contained the record. He sits in silence. He believes this will change something. It does not. Tears burned his eyes. He could not escape. The following week became torment. Every action was written before he completed it. The diary no longer revealed tragedies of strangers. It belonged to him alone. His life shrank into the pages, every gesture predicted, every movement documented. The entries stretched endlessly, filling one page after another. Then the shift came. One evening he opened the book to see a future event again. The handwriting described a neighbor entering his apartment the next day, seeking help. The neighbor would never leave alive. He froze. He knew the man across the hall. Quiet, polite, nothing more than a nod in passing. The book spoke of blood spreading across his floor, a knife in his hand, horror in the neighbor's eyes. The handwriting ended with, "He does not mean to do it, but he does." He slammed the book shut. His stomach churned. He swore he would not let it happen. He would not touch a knife. He would not open the door. He sat awake through the night, sweating, waiting. At noon, the knock came. He gripped the arm of his chair. Silence stretched. The knock came again. The voice of his neighbor called out, asking for help with groceries. He pressed his lips tight, refusing to answer. After a pause, footsteps faded down the hall. He exhaled, shaking. When he opened the book, the page had shifted. He does not open the door. The neighbor leaves. That night, when hunger drives him to the kitchen, he takes the knife in his hand. He does not notice the shadow behind him. The words described a struggle, a body falling. Not the neighbor this time. Another figure, faceless. But the knife remained in his hand. He could not escape. Days blurred into nights. The book offered no relief, only inevitability. He grew thin, eyes hollow, mind frayed by the relentless script. He no longer cared for news, no longer checked whether events matched. He already knew they did. And then he reached the end. The book had seemed endless, pages always turning, lines always appearing. But one night, as he flipped forward, he found the final page. Only one remained blank after it. His throat tightened. He forced himself to read. The handwriting was colder, sharper. It described the night exactly as it unfolded. The lamp on his desk glowing. The silence pressing against the windows. His trembling hands holding the diary. Line after line captured his breaths, his gasps, his desperate tears. The writing described him reading the last page. And then it wrote his end. He sees his own death written. He cannot look away. The room grows dark though no light is lost. A figure stands behind him, tall and silent. Its hand rests on his shoulder. His cry does not leave his mouth. The book falls shut. He dropped the diary, heart hammering. He twisted in his chair. The room was empty. The shadows stood still. He laughed once, broken and sharp. The words were only ink. He forced himself to breathe. He forced himself to believe it was false. But when he glanced down, the book lay closed. He had not touched it. The leather cover gleamed in the lamplight. He heard the faint creak of movement behind him. And he did not reach the morning.